And we're back again for another episode of the Grown and Greek podcast. Excited for this one and want to just go over some housekeeping notes for you. Please make sure that you like, share, comment, and subscribe to the podcast on all podcast platforms. Of course, Apple, iHeart, Spotify, and Amazon, wherever you get your podcast. And of course, you can subscribe and watch full episodes on YouTube. And if you know anybody of the D9 who's doing phenomenal things, please hit my DM on Instagram at Grown and Greek Podcast. So the guest I'm excited to welcome, she's an attorney who made history when she was appointed as municipal court judge in the city of Tuskegee and the town of Jackson's Gap, Alabama. She's a graduate of Spelman College, and she received her JD from Cumberland School of Law. She's licensed to practice in Alabama and Georgia. She's a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, the Links Incorporated, Jack and Jill, and a board of trustee at Alabama A&M University. And there are so many other accolades that I didn't get to, but we'll probably talk about. But please welcome to the Grown and Greek podcast, Tiffany Johnson Cole. What's happening?
Thank you for having me.
Your honor.
I'm excited for the conversation. I appreciate the opportunity, really. Let's get into it.
Thank you so much for being here. So first off, I do not remember. I do remember like getting in trouble when I was in history class in high school, and it didn't carry over that much in college. But since then, with life and things affecting you as an adult, I've become definitely a news, government, current affairs type junkie. But what I'm seeing is a lot of folks are not, and they are not aware. And it's so sad because the climate that we're in now is just, leaves you doing this a lot of times. But anyway, can we just do a little quick, brief civics education about all of the branches, the executive, legislative, judicial, and how it all intersects and how it all works?
So, I think if you were talking org chart, we're talking about three co-equal branches. So you've got the executive branch, which is the president. Then you've got the legislative branch, which is the House and the Senate. And then, of course, you've got the judiciary, which is the Supreme Court. And really, they serve the way it was created as a checks and balance amongst each other, right? So the legislature makes law. The Supreme Court applies it. And then, of course, the president has his agenda that kind of funnels into what the legislature is trying to do. But they are supposed to, when it works properly, kind of serve as a check and balance against each other so that no one branch has more power than any other branch. And it was kind of put in place that way in the hopes, I think, that extremism would not come to play, and that everybody would kind of be, I don't want to say lockstep, but when you've got three different people that have to compromise or work together, you kind of get a better outcome, right? Because everybody's checking and pushing back on everybody else. Where we are today, I don't know I think we're at a point where we're going to find out whether or not the system that was set up that has kind of worked. I don't want to say it's completely worked, but I mean, it has really in a lot of places done what it was supposed to do in keeping power in check. We're at a place now where we're about to find out whether or not it's going to withstand this current era.
And as a municipal judge, where does your part of holding the law and holding the line fit into it?
I consider myself the low judge on the totem pole.
Okay.
I am appointed by the city council. And but I am responsible for carrying out the laws of the state of Alabama and the laws of the municipality to which I serve. Okay. Right. So the city council passes ordinances, the state of Alabama passes laws, and then people who come before me, it is my responsibility to apply that law to whatever their fact pattern is and determine whether or not they are guilty or not guilty.
Okay. Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense. So let's go.
On the local level, the city council, I guess, would kind of be looked at as your legislative body, since they're the ones that's kind of passing the ordinances.
Okay.
So that's kind of how that kind of plays together.
How that plays. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go back to what you were saying about, where we are now and how we're at a holding pattern to see what's going to happen, and with, unfortunately, the current administration and everything that is dominating the news cycle and stuff like that, where we are is MAGA and those extremists, I guess, are doing things to, at this point, intimidate judges and, make it seem like the law does not stand. Where do you see that being? Is it constitutional crisis level?
Absolutely.
Okay. Talk about that.
For the last 4 or 5 years, I take that back, because we're now into the president's second term. So maybe for the last 10 years, when Obama came into office, I saw this country as being at a crossroads, right? And for a long time, I felt like we were at that fork, right? We're either going to go right or we're going to go left. There have been times when I said, oh, you know what? We're going to really get it right. After this last presidential election, I wholeheartedly believe that we're going down the wrong fork. And so there are you'll hear people say we're on the verge of a constitutional crisis, and then you'll hear people say we are in the midst of a constitutional crisis. I absolutely believe we're in the midst of a constitutional crisis.
Now, this and I don't mean to interrupt you and divert, but this doesn't have anything to do with party.
Absolutely not.
Okay, which I think people think that it has everything to do with Democrat and Republican, but it does not. Okay.
Absolutely not. And I tell people all the time, so I have voted, I'm not a straight party voter anyway, right? And I tend not to look at things that are happening from the perspective of, because I'm a Democrat, I should think this way, or because I'm a Republican, I should think this way, because I think therein lies where we have become so polarized and divided, because we see party first before we actually look at issues and decide where we as individuals fall on issues. And the reason I say, in my opinion, we're in the midst of a constitutional crisis is because just what you pointed out. We have federal court judges being arrested. They're being attacked. We have the parties coming out or politicians coming out and speaking against rulings. Whereas 10 years ago, you got a ruling in the court, people may have had an opinion, but they didn't demonize or just really go hard on the judge. They let the process work itself out. We aren't really seeing that. And then there is a very real concern, I think, on what the Supreme Court is going to do on any given day, whether or not they are going to follow the law and the issues and the facts, or if they're going to come down on the side of party. And when you look at the overturning of Roe v. Wade, that was precedent. And precedent doesn't just get overturned. And so that in and of itself causes us to be very concerned about what precedent now means, right? And I think what we're seeing out of the White House is a very intentional focus on taking things to the Supreme Court to see how much that checks and balances that we talked about earlier is really going to come into play. And I don't know. I mean, there have been some decisions that have come down that I have been, that I have felt like were okay, that was really good. There have been some that I didn't necessarily agree with, but I could follow the argument, because that's the other part of it. If we can logically follow the argument, politics aside, then we may not like it, but it's in line with what the law is. But then there are those that is clearly like, oh my goodness, that was definitely politics at its best. And I worry because on some level, when you talk about the judiciary and the legislature, I think they're in this unspoken spot of wondering who's going to actually implement the check on the you know what I'm saying? It's like,
but is it because is it because they're afraid? And like, what are they afraid of? Like, you're an elected official, that has due diligence in your corner to make sure that things are done purposely and in line. And for the life of me, I just don't understand what it is that is preventing that part of it, because it does not make any sense. It makes no sense whatsoever. But
I think it's fair. And let me tell you, and this is what I have decided. People become politicians either to serve or for a job, right?
Okay.
So if I'm there to serve, then I should be guided by, one, what my constituents want, and two, that which aligns with my value system, right? If I'm there for a job and for power, then I'm going to do that which continues to get me reelected. And I think that's what we see. I think a lot of it is fear of the loss of position and power. And I think it's just that simple, because I hear a lot of people who I know who are in those spaces saying, well, they don't necessarily agree with what's happening, but they're voting for it.
That's the only explanation.
Like you can't tell me, I don't agree with that, but I'm getting ready to vote for it anyway, because then now you're saying that it's not about right and wrong or about what's in the best interest of your constituents. It's clearly about you being afraid that you're not going to be able to return to this place of power. And I think that's what we see a lot. And I was telling my mom this, and that's why it's so important that the public and the masses are involved, because I don't know that we, even as D9 organizations, I don't know that we understand the power that we hold. If we are blowing up the switchboard, every day saying, hey, we don't support this, that provides them cover to do something different. That pushes them to have to do something different. But when we only complain on social media, don't go to their town hall meetings, don't pick up the phone and call, then they can vote. They're going to vote based on who they're hearing from. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
We've got to take more ownership and understand where our power lies as it relates to politicians. And they need to understand that if you don't align and support us, next 2 years, next 4 years, next 6 years, you out the door.
But it's almost like what's being created is an isolated sect of the population, with politicians, and it I've never seen it before. Like, I've never seen it before, to your point, that it just seems like that they're in this, bubble by themselves and don't want to realize that they came from the general population or whatever. And so, to your point too, we do have the numbers, and they do not lie. They don't lie. So if, we do take that power back and, start being engaged in stuff again, it almost forces the hand.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's the piece that we have to understand. I also think that on some level, a lot of us feel like it's just gonna be okay.
But it's not.
You know what I'm saying? We've never been in this space. We are, our parents' generation was the generation that came through the civil rights movement. And then we kind of heard about it, but didn't really, we experienced it, but not to that magnitude. And I think to some degree, we're like, okay, we've arrived and it'll be okay. Democracy will withstand this.
Mm-hmm.
It will not if we don't do something about it. I was in DC a couple of weeks ago and had an opportunity to go to Bus Boys and Poets and listen to, they had a panel discussion with 4 secretaries of states who had served under various presidential administrations in places that were either authoritarian dictatorship or were headed in that direction. And when they talked about the playbook for authoritarianism and how we are now checking off all of the signs and symptoms, it was so scary. And they were talking about how afraid they were and how close we are to, to democracy crumbling. When you look at attacks on the judiciary, attacks on the media, alternate facts, just
lies.
I
can't stand that word.
We're not even gonna talk like
that. It's just lies.
And I don't know if you were watching, but earlier today, the president of South Africa, I watched maybe 5 minutes and I was going, that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not true. It's just not true. And at what point did we decide that it's okay to just say something that is just completely a lie?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but all of those, we're walking down the line. We're headed in that direction.
How did, because you can look at it 2 ways, from the spiritual aspect, which we won't talk about, because the reality is, what we're seeing in front of our faces. But how did it get here, man? Like, it almost seems like, one person was picked to carry out this plan that has been in the works for, 30 years or something like that now. And I just don't understand how this person was picked to do that when, you contrast the opponent, Biden and stuff, they dropped out and they're the same age. Like, they're the same age. And it's almost like a ticking time bomb. Time is running out and this may be a last ditch effort for something. But what is that something? It doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense. So to sum it all up, I guess my question is, why was that person picked? What is the solution, that you can give, I guess, for, a few steps that we should take to combat whatever is going on?
So I'm gonna say this is my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Okay.
I think that Obama becoming president awakened a very ugly part within this country that we've never really reckoned with and that we still don't want to reckon with. And I think racism and bias can be both outward and loud, but it can also be subconscious. You know what I'm saying? And you don't really know what's driving you to feel a certain kind of way or to think a certain kind of thing until you sit in it. And so I think we have gotten, if there had been no Obama, I don't think we would be here. Okay. That's one. The person who was chosen, I don't think that person would have gotten anywhere unless, son, excuse me. Hurry up.
You good.
Bye. Thank you. But no, the person that was chosen, I honestly do not think he would have been chosen had it not been for Jeff Sessions. I think,
really?
And I don't know if you remember. Really. So Jeff Sessions, when they had all of the 9 million candidates in, right? Jeff Sessions and Trump went out on stage in Mobile, and Sessions put the Make America Great Again hat on. that was when he became a serious candidate and his numbers in the polls started rising.
Mm-hmm.
So I think without Sessions, there would not have been a Trump. However, I think there would have been somebody, but I think it would have looked a lot different. With Trump, he has appealed to a very I don't know any way to say, I'm just gonna say it. He has a huge appeal to white supremacy. Like, I think it's been shown that every
Mm-hmm.
single white supremacist organization supports him, right? And so I'm not saying that everybody who supports him aligns with white supremacy.
Right.
But what I am saying is that everybody who is a white supremacist aligns with him. And so I think it's kind of been like a perfect storm, but it has awakened something in this country that we have not reckoned with and refuse to reckon with. And until we do, we aren't going to get beyond it.
Mm-hmm. You think it's going to happen? Can it be forced?
I think it can happen. I
Okay.
think it will happen. I think it is happening in spaces,
Mm-hmm.
but it's going to be incumbent upon us individually to move beyond our comfort zones and force the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like people are going to have to be intentional about having very difficult conversations in order to push that issue.
What
right?
protections are there for doing something like that? Because, the way it looks, and, I have another question after this one to add to this part, but what protections are in place, if somebody does, step out to be that voice?
So, I don't know that there are any protections,
Okay.
right? But I'm going to say this. What protections did our ancestors have? When the children walked out of their schools for the Children's March in Birmingham, what protection did they have?
Mm-hmm.
None. They
Mm-hmm.
faced water hoses and dogs. What protections did Harriet Tubman have when she was going back free and slave? None. You know what I'm saying? So there probably are no protections, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are none. And one of the things that when I was at the panel discussion, they were talking about the willingness of people back during the civil rights movement and back in during other areas to they were saying that they did not have a whole lot to lose.
Mm.
And so they were able to make those choices. And it dawned on me that maybe one of the reasons why we are where we are is because we have arrived in a certain sense.
Mm.
And so now we have more to lose, right? Nobody wants to give up their good job. Nobody wants to, you know what I'm saying? Nobody wants to be considered the angry Black woman. Nobody wants to have to worry about how they're going to pay for that big Cadillac truck they driving or whatever it is. And so, we don't want our kids to be put out of the private school. So I think that in everything that we have gained from status and materialism, it has caused us to second guess or, be a little more fearful about speaking truth to power.
Mm-hmm.
Because the reality of it is our folk didn't have any protections.
Mm-hmm.
They had an integrated enterprise high school in the 70s. Nobody was protecting him when he went there. Like, he couldn't play football. He couldn't be on SGA. So, but, nobody protected him, right? So, I don't know that there are any protections.
That's crazy because we're not far removed. Like the 70s, we're not far removed from that time. So it's almost like, there should be no fear because we have not overcome, like we literally have not overcome.
Let me tell you,
not that long ago.
It's a couple of months ago when they were talking about the anniversary of the Voting Rights Act. I think that was the first time that it dawned on me that my grandparents were living in a space where they, you know what I'm saying, where they couldn't vote. And so I called my dad. I was like, wait a minute, because I always went to the polls with my grandmother. So the idea that there may have been a time that she couldn't vote was like mind boggling to me. And so when I called him, he said, no, they always voted. He said, but they had to pay the poll tax and they had to take the test. Right. And that was it. I'm like, what? You know, and so I think part of what we have done too is that we have separated ourselves from, you know, we think of it in terms of that happened long time ago.
Yeah.
Right. What the last lynching in Alabama was in the 80s.
That is crazy, man.
Right. So we are not as far removed. However, again, I think we have, you know, kind of become accustomed to a lifestyle and to a way of life. And we have enjoyed the progress that they made during the civil rights movement without understanding that that progress was fought for and died for. And that, and you know, the reality of it is we got to keep that fight up if we want to maintain those civil rights.
So with you know, like some of the rulings and stuff that have come down, like from the federal judges and stuff, and then there being a total disregard for those rulings with, you know, the current administration and everything. Where does the check and the balance happen? Like what you know, what does that mean for a trajectory? You know,
I don't know. We're all on standby waiting. And when you talk about, for instance, when the judge said that they weren't to deport that plane of people, and the plane took off anyway, and then they've said bring the guy back from Venezuela, and he hadn't been brought back yet. We're all waiting to see what that looks like and what's going to happen, because. And I'm going to be honest, I would not want to be in any of those judges' positions, because you're at a space where, you know, you don't want to say, bring him back right now, right? Because what happens if he doesn't?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So, you know, and so, but I think that's where we are. I think we're in this power struggle between the executive branch and the judiciary, and it will be interesting as to how it comes down. But we as a people should not normalize or excuse any of this, irregardless of what side we may stand on an issue, right? You may say, you know what, I am all for deportation, get everybody out of here. That's fine. That is your right. I may say, you know what, no, I don't think that's right. That is okay. We all should agree that everybody should follow court orders, because what happens when on the local level, people decide to just not adhere to the court orders? Then what? You know, now we're getting into some spaces where you've got utter lawlessness and no rule of law. So, and that's why I say it becomes bigger than any political party or political platform. It becomes literally how we have functioned as a society, you know, of rules. You know, because I'm going to have a hard time with you telling me, okay, Tiffany, you got to go to jail for not following the court's order, when, wait a minute, you know, we got all these people over here. Why do I have to follow the court order and they don't?
What was some of the advice, I guess, from the panel that you heard from of, I guess, assessing the damage and, you know, trying to build things back, or are they still a part of those regimes and stuff? Like, what was some of the solutions?
So the biggest thing, they talked a lot about the attacks on the media. And they were saying that it is incumbent upon the media to continue to push back. They also talked about the Harvard lawsuit and how important it is for the Harvards, you know, and the people who have the resources to fight these battles on the legal front, to provide a buffer for those of us who may not have those same level of resources. They talked about the importance of lawyers, taking those cases. I was very disappointed month or so ago when the lawyers started to settle
Yeah.
with the Oval Office.
Yeah.
I was very disappointed in that, because it's like we know procedurally what's right.
Mm-hmm.
And you shouldn't cave to that, especially when you got the money to fight it, right? And so I was very disappointed. And so it's just going to be very important that we all continue to speak out against those things that are fundamentally just not right.
Mm-hmm. So, kind of to me, it seems like there's so many performative antics. You got, Justice Thomas, who, was gallivanting, for lack of a better word, gallivanting with, billionaires and stuff and taking money and, spending it and living this luxurious life. You got, the president taking planes as gifts. You got them with these coins and stuff, and something, that's in the news cycle and stuff now where he gets a cut of whatever it is, some currency and stuff. And I'm just like, where does it stop? Like, where does it end? Where does it stop? Is it real?
Right.
It almost causes you to question, the reality and stuff that we're living in. But at the same time, I know folks want to get involved, and I know that, there are people with passion and things like that. You speak out a lot, on social media and stuff like that. You're not gonna. No, I don't think so. Cause I mean, I'm a junkie now. I can say that, but you bring up things and bring things to light that, we don't necessarily think about because we don't have your expertise. But at the same time, it causes you to say, well, you know what? I want to do something. Like, I want to do something because this ain't right. And I think it starts there. But where would you say that place is? And then, what methods are in place for just the average, citizen or whatever to start?
So social media is a good place.
Okay.
Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, is probably a good place. But we also have to show up and build a relationship. So one of the things I tell people, we'll say court, for instance, right? When people come to court to support whatever side, it's way easier for a judge to sentence somebody to 100 years if they don't have an audience standing behind them.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
It's way easier for a politician to go into session and vote for something that is harmful to their constituents when nobody's sitting up in the rafters watching, right? So we've got to be present. We got to be really present. We need to build relationships with our elected officials. And I think sometimes we only want to talk to those elected officials who agree with us or who we deem to be friendly. We've got to move beyond that. We've got to start having conversation with whomever it is in office, whether it is somebody you voted for, somebody you didn't vote for, somebody you like, somebody you didn't like. Okay. Because they need to know that we're out here and we exist. So I think the big thing that everyday citizens can do is to engage constantly and consistently. Like, I swear, the people in Richard Shelby's office probably had a dartboard with my picture on it.
Okay.
And because for years I signed up for his newsletter. And I would get the newsletter and I would take my little red pen and I would be like, no, I don't agree with this. No, this is stupid. No, XYZ. And then I would send it back. And I did that consistently. There were also times that I met with Senator Shelby's staff and we were talking about mass incarceration. I bought them a book and sent the book. And I was like, look, I'm sending y'all this book because I need for you to educate yourself, because clearly the policies that you all are talking about aren't going to have the outcomes. And let me tell you why. Right. And so I am still friends with a number of people who worked in his office because of those engagements. Now, did it change what they did? I don't know. But at least I stayed engaged and they had a different perspective. Right. And so I think it's important that we provide those people who don't look like us or who don't think like us with a name and a face to how those issues impact. Right now, they're talking about Medicaid, right? In this bill. Every single person who knows somebody on Medicaid, who gets Medicaid, who has a child that's getting SNAP benefits or free breakfast, ought to be blowing up the phones. Like the phone system ought to be shut down. Because that's where that's what the pressure is. Remember, they were going to they took the funding from Tuskegee University for the airmen. People blew the phones up, and what happened?
It changed. Yeah,
funding came back.
Yeah,
they were going to sell the bus stop in Montgomery. People blew the phones up. It's exhausting. I get it, right? It is exhausting.
But that's the point, to exhaust the system,
right?
So it'll work in your favor. Yeah.
Either we're gonna be exhausted, or we're gonna be somewhere looking like the Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah.
Right. And I just, Lord have mercy.
And women's rights are, a whole nother issue. Well, let's bring the D9 into the conversation. Because we've had Pastor Jonathan Mason Sr. on the podcast, and he's the former international president of Phi Beta Sigma.
Okay.
And so, one thing that he talked about was, we got to get away from social media, likes, clicks, whatever. Get back to holding the line with social justice. Period, point blank. And the reasons why we were founded, and the power and stuff that we have. Please speak to that too, because I'm trying to do my my part with the podcast, for one. But if if your voice speaks to that point, it'll help too.
Oh, absolutely. Like, we have the one. I absolutely agree that all of us have to get back to why we were founded and reflect on the time period in which we were founded in, right? And what was going on, and then from there's just so much that we can do collectively, all of us together. But I wholeheartedly agree. Like the likes, the shares, the strolls, all of that's great, right? But we are in a crisis. Our communities are in bad shape. My first year of law school, my criminal law professor told me that people become lawyers because they want to help people, right? We all join these organizations because we say we want to serve the community. We got to serve the community. Like, we've got to serve the community. And that means, like he said, holding the line. Speaking out and loudly and collectively about these policies that are harmful to our community. There's a lot of power within Black organizations, period. If we could come together, oh my goodness, and all sing from the same sheet of music. Oh, wow.
Do you see that happening?
No.
Okay.
I don't.
Okay.
I think it's possible. I absolutely think it's possible. But again, it's going to require a commitment to not be afraid of what may come. Right. And I feel that way about HBCUs too. So when I talk about Black organizations, I'm talking about all of us. I'm talking about D9. I'm talking about HBCUs. Like, we've got to be able to sit at the table, put aside the individual egos and the individual need to have credit for whatever it is, and really be willing to say, okay, y'all, we are willing to put it all on the line for this. because it's the right thing to do.
And is that, you think, what's coming next? Like you sitting on the trustee board with A&M, and you will be directly on the front lines of whatever takes place that will affect an HBCU. What do you see? Like, do you see attacks or situations where HBCUs are negatively affected to extinction? What do we need to do, to be ready for that fight?
So again, I think there are some spaces out there where that is possible.
Okay.
When you look at some of the schools, even in Alabama, and some of the struggles that they're having or that they have had, and some of the executive orders that have come out, a number of schools have lost funding. I've seen all of that in the news about, this school loses this amount of funding, so I think I'm not going to take for granted that nothing is impossible, right? Because I think sometimes we feel like, again, this is just 4 years. It's going to be okay. I don't take that for granted, right? I don't take where we are today, because at any given moment, something can change. And I think it would be amazing if HBCUs, even if it's just alums, say, you know what, y'all, we getting ready to come together and we're going to demand that our schools work together to create a fund, to create a plan, to say we aren't, we stand ready. Whatever happens, if it happens at one institution, it happens at all of them. But again, I think we are all, one, I think we think everything's going to be okay. And two, I think we are not at that place where we're willing to risk everything for the right thing. And I think you really got to be able to say, you know what, I can walk away from this house. And I'll tell you, my daddy told me when I was in school at Spelman, he said, I'm a free Black man. He said, this stuff in this apartment, I don't care nothing about it. He said, the people can come take it today. He said, that car out there, they can come get it today. And I'm like, what? No, they can't. Wait, no, sir. No, we are not there. No,
right.
But there's something to that mindset to say, you know what? You can come get all of this stuff. And like, I'll give you my dad is one of the most principled men I know. And I think that's why he has been able to participate in the movements that he has. He was at Tuskegee University in vet school. They told him that he had to either shave his beard or he could not come back.
Wow.
Which do you think he did?
He didn't shave his beard.
He did not. Yeah. He is not a veterinarian to this day.
Wow.
Because he said there was nothing that any animal that he ever came in contact with would say about his beard in the 60s when everybody was wearing them. So, but
that's it. That's it.
Do you know what that means? Like, that means he was willing to walk away from his lifelong dream of being a veterinarian, from a very lucrative career doing something he loved based on principle. We got to be able to say, you can come get all this stuff. You can take all of this stuff from me. But what I'm not going to do is back down from a fight when I know it's the right thing to do. And I don't know that we are there individually or collectively. And until we get to that space, we run the risk, organizations, universities, institutions we all, there's a risk there. Until we get to that point where, we like, hey, I'm a call on the spirit of Harriet and we're going to make it do what it do.
But it's possible.
It is absolutely possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is absolutely possible. We just got to get there.
So what's next for you? And what are you doing in your fight that we can participate in and all of that stuff?
So, you know what? I don't know that I got an answer for that, really. Okay. So at this, I don't know. Whatever the next thing is, the next thing. Like, and I'll give you an example. Last week, I ended up at the school board meeting in Tuskegee because they have implemented some policies that I feel infringe on the rights of parents and citizens' freedom of speech, right? And I think that's also, we got to take the fight. If we take the fight to the local level, then we'll get to figure out, we'll know what the next place is on the net. Because a lot of what we're saying in our communities, we don't like to admit it, but it is a microcosm of what we're saying in the grand scheme of things. And that's one of the things I told them. I'm like, we're living in a country where they're rolling back rights. And here we are in Tuskegee rolling back rights. How is that different? It's not. So I think for me, it is being a very loud voice in places where other people may not feel comfortable speaking. Because I believe everybody has a voice, right? I don't buy this idea that certain people don't have a voice. I think everybody has a voice. I do think there are voices that people tend to listen to more than other voices. So I think it is very important that those of us who have a platform and a voice, no matter if it's 10 people or if it's 50,000 people, to use our voice to elevate and to bring attention to those issues that are impacting the people in our community. And I think it's important. We got to educate people, right? I am forever talking to young people about why they should vote, and when they say, well, I don't vote, it doesn't impact me. Sir, you complaining about the state of your roads, you complaining about the cost of your utilities. That's why you vote. You complaining because Pookie got to go to prison on a weed case. Well, guess what? That's why you vote. Because it's the prosecutor who's going to decide that. So I just think we have to take advantage of those day-to-day opportunities to pour into people, to educate people, and to bring, to highlight those issues, and to speak out against those untruths, those lies that we constantly hear, in spaces and in people who we share space with, who respect us, who may not think like we do.
Well, I am thankful for this conversation because I've been able to get some of my thoughts out.
Well, I have enjoyed it.
Because, I sit here and stew and just like, that's a lie. And you sit here like, I cannot believe that this is what's going on. And my face is always like in a state of shock. And, and it's you have to detox, at a certain point, because it can drive you to a point of anger, and it's nothing to be angry about because you can do something about it, But this conversation, like I said, thank you for being on the podcast, but thank you for, being expressive and, giving your expertise and everything, because it's needed. It's needed so much. And you are, brilliant. I was looking at your resume and I'm like, Tiff is bad.
Thank you.
I know I don't know everything, but the word on the street definitely goes hand in hand with the convo and with the resume. So thank you so much. And as we go through this time, I would love to, keep having conversations with you. So.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for having me. And I have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and definitely let's expand the conversation, for sure.
We gonna do that. So your social media, how can people follow you and keep up with
what's happening?
Tiffany.
It is, I think Facebook is Tiffany Johnson Cole. I think on Twitter is Attorney T Johnson Cole. And on Instagram, it's just Tiffany Johnson Cole. That's terrible. Let me tell you something. I am a horrible promoter. I never have business cards. I'm horrible. And as far as loud as my mouth is, I love to be somewhere in the background, not seen a
Well,
whole lot.
well, look,
That's
I'm a
probably a
graphic designer.
whole nother Black woman's imposter syndrome, mental health conversation.
If I'm a graphic designer, so let's go ahead and knock out those business cards at least. Something.
Well, I do have a virtual one. Somebody
Okay.
did hit me to a virtual one. So now
Okay.
when people ask, I'm like, wait a minute, I can't share it to you. Yeah, it's bad. It's
Okay.
bad.
Well, cool. Well, we good on that. Well,
Absolutely.
thank you so much. Like I said, I definitely want to keep the conversation going, and I look forward to it, and I'm definitely keeping up with what's going on social media, because we do follow each other on Facebook, so
Yep.
we can stay in that space. So that wraps up another episode. Of course, thank you so much to Tiffany Johnson Cole for the powerful conversation, and make sure that you like, share, subscribe to the podcast on podcast platforms. Follow us on social media at Grown and Greek Podcast. And until next time, if you know anybody in the D9 who's doing phenomenal things, who has a voice and who wants to share it, and we can share and empower the rest of the community, please hit me at my DM on Instagram at Grown and Greek Podcast. You can support Grown and Greek by subscribing to the podcast, shopping our exclusive luxury accessory line, or purchasing books from the D9 Book Club by visiting our website at grownandgreekpodcast.com. Don't forget to like, comment, and share on social media at Grown and Greek Podcast. Thanks for watching.